Welcome to This Week in South Carolina. I'm Gavin Jackson. This week concluded a special 2-week session at the State House. We talked with Associated Press reporter Jeffrey Collins to find out what lawmakers did and how it affects you. Also, I speak with Kirk Randazzo. He's a professor at the University of South Carolina, and we look at the state of play facing the Supreme Court. Now the latest from this week. South Carolina is one of the worst states in the country when it comes to the COVID-19 virus. A recently published White House Coronavirus Task Force report found our state has the 10th worst coronavirus transmission rate and second worst for percent positive rate in the country. This report came out just days after the U.S. Surgeon General visited Columbia to kick off a surge testing initiative to help tamp down increasing cases in the county.
I want people to understand this is going to be perhaps the most important flu season of our lifetimes. It is critically important that we not have a bad flu season on top of a bad COVID season, because it could overwhelm our healthcare systems, and it will also confuse our ability to be able to screen for COVID.
Acting Director of Public Health, Dr. Brandon Traxler, said the state continues to be aggressive in its testing.
We're providing testing daily in the large metropolitan areas, and we're increasing the average number of testing opportunities from just under 8 events a day to over 12 events a day now statewide, and that continues to increase. To ensure South Carolina has the capacity to increase these testing efforts, we've contracted with 4 additional labs, bringing our total lab capacity to 8,800 specimens a day.
Before the honors and remembrances took place this week for the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the posturing for her replacement was already underway. On Monday, Senator Lindsey Graham spoke at a campaign event for Nancy Mace in North Charleston, where he gave his opinion on the Supreme Court confirmation process, which his Judiciary Committee will oversee in the coming weeks.
I will be leading the charge to make sure that President Trump's nominee has a hearing, goes to the floor of the United States Senate for a vote, because that is my job, and I believe I am doing what the people of South Carolina want me to do in this regard.
Graham shifted his stance on election year appointments, he says, as a result of the contentious Kavanaugh hearings. This, despite giving his word in previous years.
If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process is started, we'll wait to the next election.
And in Columbia, the General Assembly closed out their special 2-week session on Thursday. Several retiring lawmakers also gave their farewell speeches, including Orangeburg Democratic Senator John Matthews. Matthews is the longest-serving African-American lawmaker in South Carolina history, and he had these parting words.
I've been in office for 46 years, but there's something that I learned in my initial election. I learned something about people. I'm going to pass that same advice on to you. And that advice is this. People will forget what you say. People will forget what you do. But people will never forget how you treat them.
Now to discuss the latest on the Supreme Court and the state of play, I'm joined by Kirk Randazzo. He's a judicial politics expert, and he's also chairman of the Political Science Department at the University of South Carolina. Professor, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
So before we get into the whole state of play right now, I really want to just talk about the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's late in state now at the Supreme Court. She'll be at the Capitol on Friday. I want to just ask you just about her monumental career as a litigator and on the Supreme Court. What is her legacy that she leaves behind, sir?
Well, I think it's very fair to say that Justice Ginsburg was a giant in the rule of law and a champion for equality, and specifically for gender equality. Prior to when she became an attorney, women were not allowed to secure a loan by themselves or a mortgage or even have a credit card if they didn't have a man that could co-sign the application with them. And these were all causes that Justice Ginsburg championed. But before she even reached the Supreme Court, this was her call, her passion, and she stuck with that over decades of work to put women more on an equal playing field with men.
Mm-hmm. And then when she got on the court, some stinging dissents too, when when things didn't really go in her favor, the court's favor, in her opinion, on some matters as well.
That is true, and that, I think, is a reflection of just how smart she was, smart and witty. She could go toe to toe with the best of them. And for example, Justice Antonin Scalia, he would pen some pretty sharp dissents also. And he and Ginsburg, despite the fact that they were on opposite sides of most disputes, they were the best of friends, and I think they appreciated each other's intelligence and wit and love of other things like the opera, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear them talk a lot about collegiality on the Supreme Court, but let's switch gears from collegiality to Congress, where that really doesn't exist anymore, and talk about how the priorities there right now. We have seen that court stacking has been a big priority. Federal courts for the lawmakers, Republicans, Senator Mitch McConnell has made it a big priority to get as many conservative judges onto the federal bench as possible. Where does this now fit into that priority? It sounds like it's full steam ahead right now. What do you expect to be seen over the coming days?
Well, I think the coming days are just going to become increasingly partisan and bitter. I think what we're seeing is the culmination of a strategy by Mitch McConnell in particular, but Senate Republicans as well, where they prevented President Obama from filling several judicial vacancies, the most notable of which was when Justice Scalia passed away and Barack Obama nominated Merrick Garland to fill that vacancy. Mitch McConnell didn't even allow hearings for Judge Garland, and that was an unprecedented step. Previously, senators, regardless of party, would at least do the courtesy of meeting with the nominee and then having an up or down vote. And that didn't happen with Merrick Garland. And I think that's why Democrats in the Senate are crying hypocrisy or foul right now, because they feel like McConnell and other Republicans are trying to ram something through at the last second.
And there have been times in our nation's history where there have been, close to elections, these situations have happened, but this has never gone through as it's planned to go through right now. I mean, is precedent just being thrown out the window right now? I mean, it's obviously a good short-term gain for a lot of Republicans, for the president himself, but I mean, what do you see long-term ramifications? I mean, we're living this day-to-day life, but 5 years and the next Supreme Court justice vacancy, how does this affect things down the road?
And I think that's the heart of the issue. We have seen vacancies in election years previously, and they were filled regardless of whether the Senate was the same party of the president or not, up until 2016. And the rationale that was put forward by Mitch McConnell, I think, took everybody by surprise, and there was an expectation that we now had a new norm in the Senate. But now, with the vacancy caused by Justice Ginsburg's death, that norm has been thrown aside as well. And it just seems like the Senate is playing sort of pure partisan politics. And that does bring up some long-term questions about the Supreme Court and whether or not a future Democratic majority may increase the size of the court, whether people will try and change the terms of Supreme Court justices. There are a lot of ideas being floated around that would fundamentally affect the Supreme Court as an institution. And I think that's something that everybody should be very, very upset about and caution against going further down that particular path.
We're talking about ramifications here of this process. We're less than 40 days away from the election. You already have Republican senators saying, yes, I'm for the nominee. A nominee has not been named yet. We're expecting it Saturday evening. So walk me through this timeline. It's going to be in Senate Judiciary Committee, which is headed by our Senator Lindsey Graham, our senior senator here. It seems like it's going to be a pressure cooker. We typically see the average, I think, for the justices on the court right now has been about 60 days for this confirmation process. We have less than 30 days before the election. People don't want to do this in the lame duck session. I mean, do you have any idea what we could be seeing over the next 30 days before November 3rd?
I think the question becomes whether or not Lindsey Graham, as chair of the Judiciary Committee, will start cutting corners. Typically, the committee takes a long time to vet nominees and make them answer both written questionnaires, but also come in and testify before the Judiciary Committee and answer verbal questions. And then the committee deliberates for an extended period of time before it votes on whether to pass the nominee to the full Senate or not. And if the nominee goes to the full Senate, then we essentially start the process over again, and we have some additional questions and additional debates among the full Senate. In order to get this nomination through prior to November 3rd, a lot of that procedure will need to be dropped. And I'm not sure that's a good idea either for the long-term legitimacy of the Supreme Court, especially given allegations when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated that the Judiciary Committee did not fully examine the entire record that Kavanaugh had produced. I think this could potentially further harm the legitimacy of the Supreme Court.
One of our most sacred institutions you're talking about there too. And you know, Professor, we have about 3 minutes left too. What about if the president nominates someone who's already been through the federal process? You know, there's one of these federal judges he's appointed. Would that help maybe make the argument that, oh, they've already been vetted for the federal bench, you know, for one of these appellate courts perhaps? Maybe we can just kind of carry over what we learned from them during those hearings and just say, we've heard from them before. We know what's going on here. They're already on the bench. We can just kind of, you know, fast track them through for the Supreme Court.
Well, that is an argument that we are likely to hear, but again, that's not a process that the Senate has typically followed. And you think the majority of justices on the current Supreme Court were also Court of Appeals judges prior to their nomination. So we had that same type of dynamic, but the Senate made it very, very clear that evaluating a person for a lower court position is not the same as evaluating them for the Supreme Court. And to throw that out now, again, means that we abandon decades of process and procedure and precedent that the Senate has adhered to.
And I just saw a recent CNN poll that says 59% of Americans say the Supreme Court vacancy should be filled by the president elected in November. 41% say Trump should fill it. How do you see this benefiting Senator Lindsey Graham? We have just about a minute left. Is this going to help maybe boost his standing with some of these diehard right-wing people that are in President Trump's base? Maybe help him avoid some of the political squishiness he's maybe been a party to over the years and how they might be viewed by him? How does this help him?
I'm not sure that it does. I think Senator Graham has painted himself into a corner because after the Kavanaugh nomination, he is on record as saying, hold me to my words. If a vacancy comes up in the final year of Trump's presidency, we will not act. And now he's going back on that and trying to use the Kavanaugh hearings as a justification, except for the fact that those hearings came before his words where he said, we won't do this. So I think Senator Graham is looking a little hypocritical right now, and I'm not sure how he escapes that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously that'll be something for more swing voters and independent voters to weigh, more so maybe than Republicans in that base. So a lot to look forward to over the next month. Maybe we'll be talking in the future, depending on how things go. Kirk Randazzo, professor of political science at the University of South Carolina and the department chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now to discuss the latest action under the State House dome is Jeffrey Collins. He's a reporter with the Associated Press. Jeffrey, welcome. Looks like you are at the State House. Very honored for you to make time for us.
Yes, I was a little surprised to be here today. We thought we might wrap everything up yesterday, but a few things happened, and now the House is the only one that gets to hang out here with us today.
Like I should say, it is Thursday morning. We're taping this. It's the last day, the final day of this special 2-week session and the year, we should say, too. And it's been quite a year, Jeffrey. Last time we talked, I checked my notes, was in May. We saw lawmakers leaving for the summer. Things were so different in May, we can't even compare it to right now. But they were leaving. They had set this time aside, these past 2 weeks, to kind of take up budget issues when they got a clear idea about where revenues were, and also take up some other issues. What have we seen over these past 2 weeks? I was kind of expecting a little bit more of a whirlwind, and it seems like they've been pretty focused on a couple issues. What was decided?
The big focus was on voting. They passed a law that will allow everyone to vote absentee. There's some issues with that we can get into later. They passed the Senate passed a kind of a supplemental budget bill that kind of added on to what they had copied and pasted from the previous year, but then the House just ignored that, so that didn't get fully completed. And the other big deal they dealt with was the second round of CARES Act funding, the nearly $700 million that was left over that they needed to allocate.
Mm-hmm. And we'll definitely get into the voting in a moment, but first I want to talk about that budget situation. We did see the Senate work on a budget, because up until when we started the new fiscal year, July 1st, it was a continuing resolution because no one knew where revenues were going to be going, so they just operated under the existing fiscal year. And it sounds like that's what we're doing again this go around. What did the Senate do, and what did they send to the House, and what did the House end up doing with it?
Essentially what the lawmakers did before they left in May was copy and paste last year's budget to this year's budget. Just everything remained the same because they were very unsure how much revenue the state will take in this budget year. So then when the Senate came back, they added a few things to that. They added about $50 million for education, most of that going towards step raises for teachers, which are those small several $100 raises they get for each year of experience they have. They also added about $20 million that would give $1,000 bonuses to state employees that make less than $50,000 who had to work with the public during the COVID-19 crisis, like, prison guards, state troopers, some frontline healthcare workers. And they did a few other things. They set aside $500 million of the roughly $750 million the state has just for in case we have mid-year cuts. They set that aside. And then they sent it over to the House. Well, the House went along with the governor's office, who said, look, we don't know what's going to happen, so let's just not spend anything extra at all, wait till January and see if maybe we can do a few of these things then.
And I was talking to House Minority Leader Todd Rutherford of Columbia, and he was saying, another reason that they didn't really take up the budget was because they were worried that it would kind of go off the rails a little bit in terms of people adding amendments to it, trying to bring up a bunch of different issues, some social justice issues. Was that also a calculus at play there, essentially, that they didn't want to devolve into something that they really couldn't control?
Yeah, you follow the budget process around here, every year there's a debate over abortion. Every year there's some debate over some education items. This year, there probably would have been some debate maybe over some Heritage Act issues and some Confederate monument and flag issues and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think there was also a thought in the House is that we can, by not doing anything, we keep that kind of thing from going on and maybe knocking the session off track.
Mm-hmm. But it's still encouraging news to see that the state has that money, essentially. We compared to other states and how they have fared, we still have a substantial amount of one-time dollars. We still have some recurring money. Again, lawmakers, leaders want to see how this plays out before they start committing money to it. But it's good to know that that's kind of the fiscal shape we're in as a state right now.
Well, and the specter that was remembered by both the budget leaders in the Senate and the House is the 2008 Great Recession, when South Carolina had to take out like $1 billion from its budget. And there were agencies that said that it took them a decade to recover from that massive cut in 08 and 09.
Yeah, talking about that unemployment trust fund right there is something that they're trying to show with that CARES Act money. Jeffrey, we were talking about the teachers. There's a lot of focus on teachers this week because of that pay raise, potentially the money there for them. Any reaction from them in terms of how this all shook out with the House?
Well, our grassroots teacher group, SC for Ed, the one that organized about 18 months ago, held the big giant rally that brought about 10,000 people to the State House in May 2019. They had a virtual advocacy day, and they're upset. They wanted to have these step raises. They aren't happy that the House didn't do it, and they're also unhappy about their safety being questioned because of the push to bring kids back into school 5 days a week across the state, when there are some debate at the bare minimum. There's some people that straight up say it's just too dangerous right now with COVID-19.
Let's switch gears from the budget and from teachers and look at, again, talking about dangerous situations. We'll talk about voting. Tell us what's been going on with the voting. I feel like we saw some action. We saw a law being passed that's going to kind of bring us back to where we were for the June primaries, but then there's also been some muddling when it comes to sending in these absentee ballots with witness signatures. Kind of walk us through where we are right now and what people should know about how they can vote absentee.
So on the first day of the special session last week, the House passed the bill that the Senate actually came in and did on independently a few weeks before, and it allows no excuse absentee voting. Anyone can vote, don't need the excuses like I'm over 65, I'm not going to be in town. No excuse at all. You just go in and either request your ballot by mail or vote absentee in person. One of the arguments was, should we require a witness to sign an absentee ballot that gets mailed in, an independent witness? Well, the arguments there are, we don't want to expose someone else to COVID-19 along with the voter himself or herself. So all those issues are before a federal judge who ruled last week that the witness requirement is not constitutional in the current state of emergency that we're in. So right now, that ruling was appealed. So right now we don't know if you need a signature or not on your absentee ballot. And they start voting absentee in less than 2 weeks. So that issue is going to need to get fixed.
Yeah, and it sounds like right now election officials are telling people that they just need to use the witness requirement as it is, because those ballots are already going out to voters right now. Counties are sending those ballots out, so people need to get that witness signature, because this is going to work its way through the courts. We're less than 40 days away from the election itself. And even closer deadlines, too, when it comes into turning those ballots in.
Well, and you can see a situation where, okay, I didn't think I needed a witness signature, and then the judge's ruling is overturned, and how do you go back and get the signature then? I mean, I don't think you can. So the voting folks are more telling people, go ahead and get that signature anyway, just to be on the safe side.
And Jeffrey, when it comes to election security and safety, we heard from Marcy Andino, the executive director of the State Election Commission, over the summer asking about, safeguards for the election, and she wanted several more things than what has been given to them in the commission from lawmakers and signed by the governor. It's kind of surprising that we saw this slate of items that they want, more drop boxes, more access, consolidating locations for people to vote from their vehicles if they're disabled. Is there a reason why we didn't see more of those things get their way into the law that's now been passed for the election?
Well, I mean, I think Republicans were a little leery of drop boxes. I mean, it kind of dovetails to the entire United States voter debate that's going on. I think that they were worried that there might be some, that people could break into boxes, things of that nature. And the whole witness signature thing, if you talk to the Republicans who fought it, it's a whole matter of, that signature on there can be used to detect fraud. Mm-hmm.
Again, still, we should say that fraud has been really negligible in the state of South Carolina as well. But Jeffrey, kind of switching a little bit more from election security to, you are there at the State House Thursday, the last day. There's a bill going through the House right now that just got passed by the Senate dealing with incentivizing investment in rural broadband, probably the one big good thing that we're seeing come as a result of this horrible pandemic. Can you kind of give us an idea about what we might be seeing from this and how this might dovetail into the CARES Act funding, the federal money that we're getting to help support the state during this time?
I think that was the surprise of yesterday, was that, this bill had been kind of dormant and not spoken about a lot for a while. But, suddenly about 6:30, 7 o'clock Wednesday night, they said, hey, we've got a compromise in the Senate. They passed it. It provides enough money to give about 200,000 people or families, houses, broadband service, which in rural areas, and it allows the access to power lines, which everybody has electricity. So that's the easiest way to get to these houses is through their power lines and through the fiber cables that are already leading to those houses. So this should provide, I mean, if you, depending on what numbers you look at, maybe a third of what's missing in South Carolina, fourth to a third of what's missing, and it also allows the state to access federal money that's being given to states to help expand this broadband capability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of hand-in-hand work there, it sounded like, too, between state lawmakers and federal delegation members, too. So exciting to see that, especially with all that money on the table that has to be spent by the end of the year. So it's going to be interesting to see the next few months as this plays out. Speaking of the next few months, Jeffrey, this was a session like no other that we've seen in recent memory. A lot of the issues really couldn't get debated. A lot of bills were left on the table. This is the last year of a 2-year session. Bills are dead now at the end of Thursday. Where do we go in January? I mean, is it going to be like a matter of copying and pasting and hopefully getting bills back to where they were this year and kind of picking up where we left off and maybe sprinting a little bit faster to make up for a whole lost year, essentially?
Well, I hope you got a 7-second delay, Gavin, because they're going to bring up two words nobody wants to hear. I don't think, or not a lot of people want to hear around here. Santee Cooper. I mean, that's still out there, and the sine die allowed them to wait until May to the bid to buy it and everything. Everything's still there until at least the end of next session, 2021 session. That's going to come back like a zombie, right? Education's going to come back. I mean, those massive education bills that the Senate spent 8 weeks debating, they're dead. They just died. I mean, no time to do it after the pandemic struck. So you're going to have a lot of education reform discussed. You're going to end up with, Speaker Jay Lucas has created several subcommittees to talk about criminal justice reform. I mean, one of those subcommittees agreed with some language for a hate crime bill in South Carolina, which South Carolina is only one of 3 states that doesn't have a state hate crime bill. So you're going to hear a lot of criminal justice stuff because that's going to be one of Speaker Jay Lucas's big deals next session.
Gotcha, Jeffrey. We're going to have to leave it there, but there's so much to look forward to, especially in the coming days, and then, of course, next year, too. And we have an election. All those lawmakers under the State House, the senators, the House members are up for election. Not too many competitive races, but we will be watching on November 3rd with you. Jeffrey Collins with the Associated Press.
Hey. Thank you, Gavin, and remember, keep your hand sanitizer and your mask available,
There we go. Great plug. See you, Jeffrey. To keep you updated throughout the week, check out the South Carolina Lead. It's a podcast that I host multiple times a week, bringing you the latest news facing the state involving COVID-19, politics, business, and more. You can find it at southcarolinapublicradio.org or wherever you find podcasts. Also, be sure to tune into SCETV stations Monday evening at 7 p.m. We're hosting live the 1st Congressional District debate with Joe Cunningham and Nancy Mace. I'll be joined with Post and Courier's Jamie Lovegrove, and we'll have a full hour of debate. You can also check that out on South Carolina Public Radio stations and on our social media platforms. For South Carolina ETV, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.